Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first panel discussion of today, our Nutrition Day back at the Healthspan Show. I'm so excited to welcome you for today's panel. We've got a great group for you. Really interesting topic. We've heard so much the last couple of days about functional ingredients in the functional space. So really looking forward to diving into that in a bit more detail. But without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to your moderator for today to talk about the role of functional F&B in a health-conscious society. I'm going to introduce you to Jim Cali from Next Gen Nutrition Investment Partners. Jim, over to you.
Angela, thank you very much. And everyone, welcome to our panel. As Angela said, the topic for today is what's the role of functional food and beverages in an increasingly health-conscious society? And today we'll explore functional areas like sugar reduction, sleep, calmness, relaxation, and probably the most topical one as we leave the pandemic, or knock on wood, is immunity boosting benefits. So it's a big topic for everyone. Quick intro about myself. I am a partner in a small emerging venture capital firm called Next Gen Nutrition Investment Partners. We focus on topics which have superior nutrition with a kinder impact to the planet. So given that's our investment focus, today will be a very fascinating panel for me, and I look forward to learning a whole lot from our panelists. What we'll do with the format is we'll have a brief set of introductions first. I will then introduce a topic. We'll have a bit of a discussion and see if it draws to some conclusions. Please feel free to submit questions and we'll try and work them into the discussion. So as much as we can with 100 and something people on Zoom, we'll see if we can make it feel live. With that, I'd like to just move on and introduce my fellow panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves, who they are, what they do, and maybe a short overview on how they're looking at functionality in food. So Nora, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Jim. Delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Very briefly, my name is Nora Khaldi. I'm the founder and CEO of Nuritas. And if you imagine creating ingredients that can truly transform human health, that have all the tick boxes of like natural, plant-based, food grade, grass, but have food science behind them, that's really what we're bringing together. So creating ingredients that you can either replace current ingredients that aren't as healthy or add functionality to products has been a big challenge. And it takes usually decades and decades to identify active ingredients with health benefits, and pretty expensive to do so as well. And this is why there's only a very small pool of active ingredients currently used by the food and beverage industry, because it takes a long time, it's very expensive, and there's no real IP and differentiation there. And what we're bringing is using machine learning, artificial intelligence to accelerate the discovery and create these incredible grass food grades with true science behind the ingredients that can really transform human health.
Super. Let's move on, and a different take we'll get from Shari then.
Hi, my name is Shari Leidich, founder and CEO of Max Sweets. I've been in this industry about 20 years. You can see my gray hairs. And I started out of my need to heal multiple sclerosis. So I started with Two Moms on the Raw, which is a raw foods company. And we now are making functional zero sugar sweets. And we pride ourselves on the ingredients we use, Nora, grass-fed collagen, grass-fed gelatin, what we use pea protein for non-GMO for our vegan. But for me, it's really important to keep carbs and sugar virtually not existent in my diet for me to be healthy, because I don't use medicine to heal, I use food. So I'm really excited to be here today with you guys, because I come from a personal need for this, and I've created these great brands. So I'm really excited.
Super. Thanks, Shari. Okay, let's move on to Shawn.
Thanks, Jim. Shawn Folkson. I am the founder and CEO of Nightfood. We are a snack food company that is addressing the nighttime snacking problem. What we know is that at night, consumers all around the world tend to reach for the least healthy choices that they make all day. A lot of people try to, eat healthy, eat well all day, and at night, due to biological programming, weakening willpower, people tend to make their least healthy choices. And not only are these things unhealthy? You know, the most popular choices are cookies, chips, candy, and ice cream. Not only are these things unhealthy, but they tend to be sleep disruptive. So we are a better for you snack company with a key differentiation point. There's been many better for you snack companies over the last 10, 15 years, stealing billions of dollars in market share from the legacy brands. But we're different in a unique way in that we know that so much snacking is happening at night and nobody's ever addressed our declining sleep quality as a culture, as a nation in the United States and really all around the world. So we manufacture and distribute our snack products specifically with better sleep in mind.
Super. And maybe our last panelist will go to Eran, please.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. My name is Eran Baniel. I'm the CEO of DouxMatok. So Dou is in French sweet, Matok is in Hebrew sweet, Dou in Hebrew is double. So sweet or double sweet, that is DouxMatok. And what we have brought is a sugar-based sugar reduction solution that allows people to consume the indulgences they love, indulgences that make them happy, but do so with a much improved nutrition and at least as good a taste, if not better. And it's important because we are all talking about health and food and the contribution of the proper nutrition to our health. There's physical health, but there's also mental health. And it's important that we don't forget the second and sacrifice it for the first. Sugar, when consumed properly, is a happy ingredient to consume, and people need sugar. And it's interesting that during COVID, people consumed about 30% more sugary products, although obesity and diabetes are the second biggest risk for death from corona. So there's a disconnect which DouxMatok is out there to resolve.
Great. That's a beautiful introduction, perhaps, to our first topic. What I wanted to tee up for folks to start was, it's always good when we're thinking about functionality. We often, dive into science. What's the physiological impact on the body? What's the patents? And it's the hard facts. But I think it's also good to start with where the consumer's coming from in any business you're in. So I'd like to tee up for our panel the first topic about consumer trends. And the period that we're in, the pandemic, we see lots of mixed signals in the marketplace. We see an increase in interest in immunity boosting food, focus on cooking and natural ingredients, focus on mental health, as Eran says, that a critical thing. And these are all a nod to greater wellness. At this very same time, we see a 30% increase in processed foods that are perhaps high in sugar, high in fat, and still the signals around sugar being the new evil. I'd like to open it up for the panelists. How are you guys seeing these conflicting signals? How do you see the post-pandemic period shaping the environment in consumer sentiment for functional foods? And feel free to join in. Maybe we'll start it just to get going. We'll start with Shari, since I think you spoke most voraciously about this when we started warming up. So why don't we start there, and please just join in as needed then.
Yeah, and I'm your consumer, right? I'm the consumer. So I just want to put out there that the sugar-free market is one of the fastest growing categories. I have a statistics here, but due to the keto and low carb trend, so going into COVID, it was 11 billion by 2020. And so I don't think that's leaving, even though COVID is here. A product like ours, Max Mallow, I don't think I mentioned my product that I represent right now, Max Mallow, in that we are a sweet treat. We are the indulgence people are looking for, but I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of swapping out the sugar that would spike my glycemic index, would cause sorry, I'm forgetting my words. Well, anyway, and cause my symptoms, let's say, to rise, and replace it with another sugar like xylitol, chicory. I know you use that, Eran, and still appeal to the audience.
Great,
There's no
great.
problem.
Anyone else about signals that they're seeing in the marketplace on this conflict, and where do you think the consumer is heading demand-wise post-pandemic?
I can take some of it, Jim. So what's
Sure, Nora.
interesting, so we are seeing this kind of dichotomy, let's say, where you're seeing a lot of a big trend, which was already on a big rise before the pandemic, before COVID, where individuals were interested in health in general. And then separately, obviously indulgence is part of everyone's life at this point as well. And then with the pandemic, we saw both increase significantly. And I think that's not going to stop. Okay, so indulgent products are not going to come down anytime soon. And the question there is, how do we make them healthier? And that's really the question of, you know, as a food company, you want to be associated to a solution, not a problem. And a lot of these indulgent products are causing issues and have already caused quite a lot of issues. You know, diabetes, pandemics, pre-diabetes, heart problems, etc. And as food companies move towards addressing that, you really need to change your products, making them healthier without compromising taste or the indulgent part. But it's all about, you know, how do we make these products healthier? And from the other side, I think that realization of consumers that their health and well-being can be tailored by what they eat and what they drink has never been at the top of their mind as currently. And I think the pandemic has accelerated that really your immune system kind of relates directly to what you eat and drink and every single day. And the same with the types of foods you eat. Research has shown that time and time again. And I think that's now getting to consumers, and that trend is never going to stop. It's just going to increase. But indulgent products are just going to continue as well. And there it's all about making them healthier.
Super, super. Shawn or Eran?
Yeah, I think they touched on it. You know, people want to be able to kind of have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to indulge, but I think they're doing it.
Or have their ice cream and eat it too, as the case may be.
Right, or have their cake and eat their ice cream. But the idea is that I think they're doing it in a more a state where they're paying more attention to the ramifications as we come out of the pandemic. I think that initially what everybody saw the first couple of quarters, people were, everybody was talking about the COVID-15 and gaining weight. And I think when maybe it felt for a lot of people like there was no end in sight, they didn't care. And they would eat without regard for, I just saw an article the other day, which I thought was maybe too soon. And it was something like, beach season is coming, right? Like everybody's got to think about what their bikini body might look like or whatever. So, I think that we went through a few quarters there where people were just not really caring too much. And, what we saw was an increase in, like you said, Jim, those processed foods being consumed. But I think as things do return to normal, people are going to be looking for, ways to be healthier but not want to give up on their indulgences like Nora and Shari said.
Great.
I would tend to agree with Nora because I think reducing sugar is only half the equation. And the other half of the equation is what in heaven's name are you bringing in to replace the bulk of the sugar? So if people are listening, milk chocolate can be as high as 55% sugar. Not that any one of us can tell the difference between 45 and 55% sugar. You are completely immersed in sugar anyway. So you can reduce sugar. You need to want to reduce sugar, and you need to come up with a better bulking solution than the existing ones, sugar being the main one, because it's dirt cheap. So whereas we started naively thinking we've got God-sent solution to sugar reduction because we do it using sugar, natural beet or cane sugar. And we do 50% reductions, but it's only when we understood that people expect us to use the opportunity of the reduced bulk and give them something they are missing, like fibers, like proteins, plant-based proteins. It's only then that the products began really providing a solution. So it's not about an ingredient anymore. We are now thinking of ourselves as a solution company.
Great. Very interesting, very interesting. I think what I heard coming out of there was 2 or 3 key themes. One, but they all revolve a bit around the idea of consciousness. You know, COVID has made us more conscious of what our diet is. We're cooking at home, we're looking at what food we eat. And I think that clearly is a nod toward wellness, and whether it's physical or mental wellness, that's an important thing. And at the same time, providing that treat and that indulgence is a big thing. And can we find ways to navigate having that treat and at the same time also caring for our bodies? My fund, we share some of the platforms that the panelists have. We are an investor in a sugar alternative called Baniel, which is a plant-based. They make allulose and tagatose as first ingredients, and so we see that idea of the dichotomy of providing a good solution and also providing indulgence as a key trend in the future. Against that, we have a question from the audience about how does the panel feel about making indulgent products healthier with also the conflict of the move toward clean label and natural products and knowing where ingredients are coming from? Is there an aversion for consumers around modified products? And maybe I'll kick it off a little bit and see if there's 1 or 2 comments. You know, from my perspective, I would argue strongly that there is no such thing as good or bad food. Food is driven by what knowledge is and how people read it and understand what their food is. And we would be naive to put a simple traffic light on something being good or bad, but rather provide the transparency to everyone of this is what's in your food. You can read it on the label. This is where it comes from. And in doing so, we can educate, you know, ourselves and consumers on making the choices that are right for them. So short labels and transparency on what's on the label, I think could be a good way to help navigate that between new ingredients and people being a little scared about it. Maybe the second bit is people like to work with stuff that's in their kitchen. So if we can give people exposure to new ingredients in their kitchen, that's another way that we could sort of overcome some of those barriers and be transparent about foods. But let me open it up if there's a question or an answer or 2 from the panel about this on navigating the difference between new ingredients and, you know, kind of clean label, simple foods.
Well, I'd love to say that when I'm going to pipe in, because I think when you have a health crisis, which is a lot of society, which is what I face, there are red lights. So there are certain things that I certainly can't have in my diet. So, so eliminating, let's say, sugar. I'm not talking about naturally occurring sugar from fruits. We use birch xylitol. We are moving over to allulose, obviously. But so plant-based. Those are things that don't cause inflammation in my body. So I do have a red light when I see, you know, cane sugar or certain sugars on a label. For me, I'm not saying that's for my children. So I just think we have to realize where the consumer is coming from.
So that's a great point though, Shari, in terms of there are red lights and green lights, but it's based on transparency. So one could fit it into their own health or health goals. Great.
Yeah,
great.
And Jim, I think that everybody's got their own things. You know, Shari pointed it out perfectly with an illustration. You know, for some people, different things might be more important, right? Some people, you know, depending on what they're following in terms of a diet plan, if they're doing keto, you know, they might be much more concerned with, you know, eliminating all those net carbs and are okay with, you know, more fat and, you know, a little bit more protein. Other people are looking for different things. So like you said, things are not good and bad, and we shouldn't put a traffic light on it. I think Shari hit the nail on the head as well, or even more so, which is, depending on what your goals are, depending on what you're trying to avoid or get more of in your diet, you can turn to the foods that can provide that. There are keto ice cream brands out there, and people will ask us, well, is this keto friendly? And talking about Nightfood, which is our product, and that's not the problem that we set out to solve. Right. So it's not. If somebody's looking for that, there's those brands. If somebody's looking for, something that, maybe has a little bit of better taste and texture, something that's formulated with better sleep in mind, then Nightfood comes in. But and there's so many solutions. I mean, that's the great thing about, especially the open market and the American market, is that all these, and globally we're seeing it too. There's a lot of different solutions, and hopefully for a lot of people, whatever they need, they're now able to find much more easily in their local stores.
Super. Let's get one more comment on this, and then we'll move on to our next topic. Does anyone else have a comment?
Jim, I think you mentioned there new ingredients, and I think the big thing behind the scenes that I think we need to realize is that as humans in general, we've only exposed very few ingredients so far, okay? And we're working with a really limited number, and we're turning in circles. And nature has a lot more to offer. It's just we haven't found them. And the question, new is not always scary, because if you're looking for, like what we're doing is identifying molecules called peptides, which are short proteins in plants that when you eat the plants, you don't get the benefit of those. Okay, so what we do is expose them. So we're identifying in everyday foods molecules that are already there, and we have been consuming them for thousands and thousands of years. So nothing is new about them. But we're simply not getting them as humans. We're not getting that health benefit because we're breaking it down. We're not exposing that health benefit. And by identifying them and making them available to humans, again, we're talking about ingredients that we've consumed for thousands of years. You're exposing a whole new world of actives that have been there forever, that we've never discovered before, with clear health benefits, and that tick all the boxes that they're in a way they're not new because they've been always there. They are easily formulated because they don't have a taste. So it's not about creating products that are going to taste differently. They are very neutral. So the goal is, how do we create better products that are tasty? And in order to do that, you need to create ingredients that are easily formulated, that have been, we've been exposed to them for thousands of years. Even novelty. So basically, novelty is not the issue here. It's our limitations as humans to identify actives that have always been there. We're not using them and make them unlockable for consumers.
So what I'm hearing a bit, which is quite interesting, again, is the idea of education and transparency. If we can tell people what's in their food, be it sugar, but in a reduced format, or be it a peptide that is naturally available, we're letting them understand what they're eating, and they can make their own choice. Great. I'm going to move us on to the next topic here a bit. And I think it's one that, again, has a little bit of attention to it. And as a venture capitalist, we always look for businesses that can scale. We look for things that could scale big. As a former, food and beverage senior executive, and the drive was always for growth and how to make things big. And there's always a tension into that. There's some drivers that are kind of pushing behind the growth, and there's some barriers that are holding you back. So in this area of functionality, there's always a few things, taste versus functionality. Can you have both? Value added and functionality versus cost and convenience. Perhaps the ability to make claims and regulatory demands. There's always this tension that may be a driver or a barrier. And I'm sure there's folks in the audience who are feeling those same things. So I'd like to put it out there for our panel. For your businesses, what are you seeing as drivers or barriers, and what are you doing to overcome them and try and use the tailwinds to grow your business and overcome the barriers? So Eran, maybe I'll start with you, since you didn't get the last comment on the last question, so you can go first.
I don't necessarily feel deprived. That's fine. But I'll pick it up. I'd say the biggest challenge for us is what differentiates us. And I'll try and explain. We came out with a company in Israel that made a trio of biscuits below 10% of sugar, which is cutting more than half of the sugar. And you don't get the red traffic light of the Ministry of Health in Israel as long as you are under 10% of sugar. And they actually taste great. They are very good for you. Everything we put to replace the sugar is better for you. And it's all flashed very clearly on the label. Then I walk into the supermarket and they sell nicely. So I'm happy for that company that took this courageous step. And I walk into a supermarket, which doesn't happen often, I'm afraid. And I look for those biscuits because I want to buy someone a small present. And I can't find them. So I walk over to the guy and I say, hey, can you tell me where are the Dani and Galit, that's the name of the brand, biscuits? And he says, oh, over there. And he points and he says, you know, where the diabetic products are. And I sort of thought, well, that in the mind of the consumer must be punishment land. That's where you go, as Shari said, when you do have to watch out for this, that, or the other. That's where you don't want to really go if you don't have to go. And wherever we speak, I try always to provide people with a chance to taste and see that it is really possible to get the taste you love, eat the cake and have it too. Get the taste you love and still do very good for your health.
Great. I heard two interesting things there. One around a driver is to really differentiate and be clear to the consumer and benefits. And there is the bit on overcoming barriers of communication, whether it's in a supermarket or whatever. So great insight. Does anyone else have a thought here?
I think
Shawn
it's really
or Shari, Nora?
Yeah, I'd love to pipe in because Eran was so kind to send me his product, and my son and my daughters have been eating it and they love it. I would say it's really important to have a self-evident product. So like the packaging really needs to let the consumer know exactly what it is. So that's the first. And I was just going to mention our challenges as an emerging brand would be sourcing our ingredients, because everybody wants to use our ingredients now, even though we were sort of at the forefront when we started. And talking to an investor, Jim, in that, you know, someone might not.
Oh, this is going to be the ask for.
No.
What check size do you write?
No, when you said, how can you expand? So I know like the marshmallow market is $250 million. That's not a lot for an investor for you. However, we like to think of Mac Sweets as a global sweets company where we launched first the marshmallow, coming out with taffies and caramels and vegan mallet. And I do think that these products are a lot bigger than they once were thought of, because people are using these ingredients, Nora, as you said, in so many different ways, because the consumer is so smart in how they need to incorporate the ingredients or these products into their diet.
Interesting. Shawn, Nora, any thoughts?
You spoke about Tailwinds, Jim. I mean, and Shari just spoke about, you know, making your product self-evident. I think for us, you know, one of the things that happened with COVID, sleep really nosedived for people, a combination of stress, who knows what else is mixed into that cocktail. There are so many variables that go into somebody's sleep on any given night, but it really became a problem. And at that same time, we were already in the process of reworking our packaging to communicate better to the consumer exactly what Nightfood is about. And our new packaging is much more focused on the positioning of sleep friendly And on the back of the packaging, it really explains what is unique and different about Nightfood in terms of the ingredients that it contains that can support better sleep, such as magnesium and calcium and zinc and vitamin B6. And I think there's a tremendous tailwind for us that we're hoping to tap into, which is, everybody's kind of always wanted better sleep. I can't think back to a time in my life, where I would prefer not to be sleeping any better than I was. But I think now even more so. And I think that, for us, tapping into that tailwind, and there's a lot of tailwinds out there. I think that as brands, anybody out there that's launching a brand, if they can find that and kind of, put that wind in their sails, I think that's extremely beneficial. And while COVID worked against us in a lot of ways, coming out of it, this is a really powerful thing that we expect to bring a big difference.
And I think, Jim, as well, just on that as well, I think, and I think again, Eran touched on it. It's taste and functionality and health benefits. I think they're coming together. And they're coming together because of new technologies appearing that can actually, again, identify ingredients that aren't going to disturb or change the taste. And that's superbly important. But I think also, because at the end of the day, people buy again and again based on taste. Taste is a major factor. Cost is major as well, but taste is really a major factor. And development of ingredients really needs to follow that. You can't just expect consumers to buy stuff on and on again when it doesn't taste right. So ingredients really need to be at the very beginning tailored towards taste being a very big factor and bringing other factors together. And I think now with technology, we can do that. With AI, you can integrate multiple different areas you want to integrate and identify ingredients. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, you see trends, consumer trends in the market. Like, for example, you mentioned, Shawn, their sleep and mood management and then immune modulation and all those. And if you look at the history of ingredients in general in the food and beverage industry, ingredients have not been developed for those areas. They've been randomly found one day in a lab somewhere, and then they've been taken to market. And then years later, you say, well, maybe this has an effect on immunity, and you discover that it may or may not. And literally, it has been, all these ingredients have been discovered backwards. And you're kind of like pushing something like a circle into a square. You're trying to fit ingredients that have never been discovered for a consumer trend into a consumer trend. And a lot of products have been developed that way because you don't have the choice. But now through technology, and that's part of what we're doing, is you start with a consumer trend. That's your point of start. You start with the consumer trend, and the consumer trend is going to be a health benefit or a functional benefit, but then that also follows taste and sustains baking, because as you bake your product, you need the same functionality at the end and so forth. And by integrating all those now, machine learning, artificial intelligence can actually identify ingredients, new ones, again, that have been in nature forever, that can have all those tick boxes at the same time.
Fascinating.
Taste, functionality, and all those for a specific consumer trend, not trying to fit it backwards.
No, I can see that. I mean, from this conversation, maybe there's a direct line, I think, where Eran started us of let the consumer know what the benefit is and be clear. So, there's a transparency there. And to bring in Nora's point, where technology has certainly changed how we can deliver those benefits. And that's a little bit mind twisting sometimes, because some of that could never have been done before. And again, that takes some explanation. And I think the lesson of not being put into a box, not being put into the dietetic section, not being put into that's not good for you, and needing to explain. And that feels like, an interesting path of consumer communication on the ability to overcome. So it's a nice way to think about that, guys, I think. We have one question from the audience here, which I think dovetails on this, which is interesting. And I'll read it directly because I think the words matter here is, do you think that food can credibly deliver a functional benefit while consumers' trust in the food industry is still low? Or what can we do about it? So I think there's a little question behind that question there, but let's address it. And I'll just mention a little bit that one of the companies that we've invested in, it's a company called Heart Dairy, which is a unique dairy where cows are on the pasture eating natural grass 365 days a year. They're never inside. So as a result, the milk is more nutritious. It's much better for the environment. They're pushing on being carbon neutral. It's the first certified humane dairy. Lots of good stuff to do there. And yeah, there is a little bit of a question around the dairy industry, and it's just like in the question there. And what we found with that business is uber transparency is the way to go. Just everything open kimono, let people see what's going on. There's cameras all over. The ability to share was one great way to kind of overcome that trust. And I think the second piece is trying to use third-party certification in a very proactive manner, not like NASCAR packaging where there's 17 little stickers on a pack and it confuses the hell out of people, but really opening up your data for a third party and let them pressure test, the accuracy of it. And those are two levers that, one of our companies have worked on. Just managing time a little bit, maybe one or two answers here. Does anyone have any thoughts about how we can push functional benefits or deliver functional benefits and build trust in the industry at the same time?
I think, Jim, I think that the lack of trust is not typically within the startup universe and the startup community, the small scrappy companies that are setting out with a mission, like DouxMatok or like Shari's, Max Sweets or Nightfood. I think the lack of trust in the food industry starts with the global conglomerates. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I think. And so, and the flip side of that is that most of the revolutionary evolution and the new benefits that are being brought to the consumer typically are not coming from those big co's. They would typically acquire the small companies that bring the change and bring the revolution. So I don't think there's a conflict between, this lack of trust in big nutrition, if we want to call it that, or big food. I don't think that really impacts the ability of startup companies, mission-driven startups, to deliver credible benefits in a way that really make the lives of the consumers better. And along those lines, we've seen moves from some of the big conglomerates, really, where they're trying to become, better global citizens. And that's a huge step in the right direction. And so they are trying to kind of patch things up a little bit and make those right moves. And I think that's the right thing to do. But again, I think most of the move forward is not coming from big food. It's coming from the startups.
Great.
Can I just say one? I know you wanted to make it quick. Sorry. So I was very mission driven in packing nutrition and function into a sweet treat like a marshmallow. But what I noticed in Walmart, and that's like your everyday consumer, right? That's everybody's going to Walmart in America, just to let everybody know. And we started out on the innovation set, but we now are going to be in 2,000. We're going to be in 2,000 retailers just to start as a permanent location. So I think the retailers are also dictating where consumers can find our products. And we are an emerging brand. We're scrappy, we're small, but we're going to be exploding because of a retailer like Walmart. Right. Same thing with Two Moms because of Starbucks. I mean, there are certain retailers or businesses that come behind a product.
They can bring credibility. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. I see people wanting to get in here. Does anyone else want to add a point, or do we want to move on?
Great question.
I think, Jim, you hit it there with your two comments. I think and again, Shawn, from a small company, absolutely. From a large company, I think when you think about it, the one thing we do every single day is drink and eat. So the impact food companies and beverage companies have on humankind in general is massive over time, like literally massive, and more than any other thing we consume. It's literally defines how we our lifespan. So it's very important for, I think, obviously consumers are like the question is, consumers don't trust large food companies anymore because of the epidemics and so forth. But I think in general, transparency, like you mentioned there, first clearly with a clear mission of we want to improve our product lines, transparency on that, and also collaborating with startups that are on that mission as well. Outside of obviously buying them, but on a collaboration basis, startups that are pushing that mission forward to collaborate and create products that really improve human health, I think is totally doable.
Okay. I'm just throwing one thing. Having spent about 30 years in large companies, and I've worked for companies like the Kellogg's company and Cadbury that were very mission driven. And I think, working in the startup space now, we do need to be thoughtful of big companies want to do well. And you had companies like Kellogg's who's really are earnest about nourishing people's lives. At Cadbury, it was 150 years of history of trying to do good, whether it was ending slave labor in Ivory Coast, or whether it was providing healthcare for workers in their first factory in the early 1900s, which was mind-bending. And the former CEO of Cadbury said, "You earn trust every day. It doesn't happen overnight, but you just make one mistake and that trust is lost." And I think that's a good lesson, I think, for the food industry, because we do have an obligation of nourishing people every single day of the year. And we have to, behave in that manner, I think. So anyhow, enough for the soapbox. Let's move on to our last question then. Topic is, and maybe just an evolution here of, we're operating in a world of a knowledge-based environment. I think when we had our pre-chat, that term came up. It's a knowledge-based environment where consumers work. They get information in different places, be it big data, clinical studies, social media, kitchen logic, or whatever. And what do you guys see as the key in promoting and moving forward ethically with functional foods? How do you use these different channels to communicate to consumers and try and ethically build a functional foods industry? And open it up for the team here.
I can take some of it, Jim. I'm a big fan of how technology has moved so fast. So there are slow industries, like food is a slow industry, still an old industry. But technology in general, apps, wearables, and so forth have come a long way in very, very short periods of time. And if you look at other industries like the processors, like chips for computers, and just simply buying a car or a computer, there are simple ways now, simple guides of how to compare a computer to another computer and a processor to another processor, and how to compare cars together in very simple terms that consumers can understand. And they can choose then based on that small, specific understanding. And that wasn't possible many years ago. It was so complicated, chips and processors like Intel and other, it was very hard to compare an Intel chip to another chip. But now they've been able to facilitate and to make it more consumer friendly, that consumers now can actually choose between different products. And any consumer, you don't need a PhD to do that. And I think that kind of fundamental understanding of how we eat, why we eat, when we eat, and what the qualities of what we eat are there's a lot of data out there, and there's already lots of apps where you can compare products based on ingredients and types of ingredients within the products, where you can compare combinations of products, where you can replace a product with another in terms of, and we're talking about foods here. And those technologies are just going to increase, and that will allow consumers to compare products.
Okay, so we see the idea of having technology and information technology as a way to enable consumers to simplify stuff.
To choose, and if you're not on that trend already, you're kind of lost, because being able to choose a product over another because this product has better ingredients within, healthier ingredients with the same taste.
It's interesting because it's also very mysterious sometimes, because we were brought up to think that 1 + 1 makes 2. Well, in food, it doesn't necessarily make 2, and 1 + 1 can be 0.5, and 1 + 1 can be 4. And that's one of the beauties of food and of food technologies. And I think AI would play a great role in that. And I'll just say that we have now a huge project we are leading for company making bars of all sorts and kinds. And we looked to source, again, linking to Nora's story about bringing stuff from the woods or from the fields, and just discovering that it tastes nice or it works good for you. And we are mixing and matching stuff using AI in order to make the discovery journey a little bit more efficient, and the functionality efficiency of combinations be closer at hand and faster to attain. And this, yes, you want to open your kimono, but yes, you might also want in another way to keep enjoying the mystery of not really knowing what to expect next time you open it. So it's the beauties of food that are sometimes different than mathematics.
Mysterious.
Interesting.
And actually, just on that one, just one note, it was there's a lot of research occurring now in Singapore. So I met this professor that was looking at combinations. Okay, and now you know the diabetes has augmented significantly in Asia, and they blame it on rice. Okay, consumption of rice, and you're like, well, you know, Asia has consumed rice for so long, and China has consumed rice for so long. So how is it a problem now and not before? And then they realized after many studies that basically the combination of rice with chicken broth, which was what they ate during what they ate with rice, had a very interesting combination where it reduced the glycemic effect of rice. But as populations moved away from chicken broth into maybe meat or other types of combinations, that kind of glycemic effect went higher, and that's the effect. So combinations are very important. Yes, yeah. And that
okay, so very interesting. So we've heard from the science side of, I think, of the panel. Let's see if the if there's a conflicting point of view or an additional point of view on this challenge.
Well, I was going to mention that I would welcome a place in the diabetic section of a store, because I do think that helps educate the consumer. So I would not downplay that in any grocery store. Try 2 locations if you can. But I do think we have to remember that not all consumers are, like we talked in our former conversations, are as knowledgeable, but they are finding out things from a doctor or from Women's World at the checkout, as I mentioned, and something hits them, or they find out keto, oh, after COVID, I could lose 15 pounds in a month or whatever it is. And they are going to make dietary choices. And then the largest consumer that's growing right now, the demographic, is the striver. And the striver wants to just make a healthy choice. Whatever that healthy choice is, they're going to make it. And if it's reducing sugar, that's what they're going to do. And they're going to live with that choice for a few months, see what happens. And perhaps they'll add another choice and then another choice. So I think it's really important to meet the consumer where they live, and not assume that they know a whole lot. So,
okay.
You know.
We have about 2 minutes left, guys, and I promised Angela that we would open up for any audience questions, and I don't know if there's anything still out there. We've tried to bring them in as we've gone along, but why don't we wait for any audience questions, and we'll see Shawn's answer or input on this topic, and then we'll see where we land.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, like what Shari said, you know, there's a lot of strivers out there, and the most important thing, if you want your message to travel and be accepted, is, does it feel true, right? Does it feel true? Is it believable? And what I found personally, speaking to a lot of people, 10,000 people and more, about their nighttime snacking, people were not thinking about what they were eating at night and how it impacted their sleep. But if I ever bring up caffeine to them or alcohol, they would understand. And now, years and years later, we're seeing the largest food and beverage companies in the world, Unilever, Pepsi, Nestle, talking about and addressing this topic. So I think that, you know, whether people are getting their information from social media, from doctors, from science journals, if it feels true and it is true, then it's going to be much more easily accepted than, I don't know, if it's just far out or far-fetched.
Great, great. I think that's an interesting kind of weave there where AI and tools like that can help the consumer digest more. They can help companies digest more. But at the end of the day, there still has to be a backbone of facts and truth. And as much as we can to develop functional foods, you know, that's a key driver in how we explain that to consumers. So that's great. Any last thoughts, team, in closing here? I think we're just about on time.
Just to say thank you.
Okay.
It was fun sharing this.
Thank you.
Super. So Angela, I think I'll hand it back over to you at this point in time.
Yes, please. And I will say thank you as well. Thanks, Jim, for conducting an excellent conversation. I feel very privileged to have, excuse me, have front row seat for this one. I found it really, really interesting. Thank you, of course, to our speakers for their wonderful time and their efforts in educating us in this space. And of course, thanks to the audience. Thanks for being so interactive and putting your questions in. Do stay with us. We've got a whole host of really interesting discussions coming up, a mixture of interactive roundtable styles and panels this afternoon. So do stay with us. We look forward to seeing you there. But in the meantime, I will say thank you very much for watching. Thank you, of course, to our panel, and thank you to Jim, and goodbye.